David's hands trembled as he stared at the corrupted data file on his screen. 3 years of working at the Galactic Historical Preservation Institute had never prepared him for this moment. The file header read, Incident Report 2847 Alpha, Human Evacuation Crisis, but everything below was scrambled into meaningless symbols and broken code fragments. He shouldn't have been curious. His supervisor Ruth had warned him about spending too much time on old database maintenance, but something about the timestamp caught his attention. 847 years ago, right when humanity was expanding into the outer colonies and everything went wrong. David ran another recovery program. This time a few sentences emerged from the digital chaos. Torvani Defense Fleet positioned between evacuation vessels and hostile forces. Another fragment appeared. All Torvani ships destroyed. Human casualties minimal. 340,000 refugees successfully evacuated. His breath caught in his throat. The Torvani, he'd heard that name exactly once, in an elective xenohistory course back at university. The professor had mentioned them briefly, an extinct species that disappeared during some forgotten border conflict. No one seemed to know much about them. No one seemed to care. David pulled up the official galactic records. The entry for Torvani was disappointingly brief. Minor spacefaring species, extinct circa 2847, casualties of territorial dispute with Drawl hegemony, population at time of extinction, approximately 40,000. Something felt wrong if they were so minor. Why would they have a defense fleet large enough to protect 340,000 human refugees? Why would they sacrifice themselves for another species? And most importantly, why were all the detailed records corrupted or missing? He dug deeper, working through the night as Station Meridian 7 rotated through its artificial sleep cycle. Most of his colleagues had gone home, leaving the archive halls empty and quiet, perfect conditions for the kind of research that might get him fired. Personal logs, that's what he needed. Official records could be altered or destroyed, but personal accounts from survivors might still exist in the backup systems. David accessed the tertiary archive, the one nobody bothered to maintain anymore because it was supposedly full of irrelevant personal data. The first log he found made his stomach turn. Day 47 of the siege, the Torvani commander, Sylvan, just told us they're going to create a defensive screen. My daughter asked me why the nice aliens with the pretty ships are putting themselves between us and the bad guys. I didn't know how to tell her they're probably going to die so we can live. Another log, different author. The last Torvani ship just went dark. They held the line for 6 hours. Every single one of them knew they wouldn't survive. Captain Sylvan's final transmission was simple. Protect the children, that's all that matters. I'm writing this from the rescue ship. My son is asleep next to me. He's alive because 40,000 Torvani decided human children were worth dying for. David's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes and kept reading, log after log, all telling the same story. The Torvani hadn't just helped during an evacuation. They'd given humanity agricultural technology that ended famines on 12 colonies. They'd shared medical knowledge that cured a plague affecting human children. They'd been friends, true friends, and humanity had forgotten them. He pulled up the Drawl hegemony records next. The official version called it a minor peacekeeping operation. They claimed the Torvani were harboring insurgents. That military action was regrettable but necessary. The casualty numbers didn't match anything David had found. The Drawl records claimed only 8,000 Torvani deaths. But the personal logs told a different story. The Drawl hadn't just fought the Torvani military. They'd systematically destroyed every Torvani colony, every settlement, every ship. It wasn't a battle. It was genocide, and someone had worked very hard to make sure nobody remembered. David's hands moved across the keyboard with growing urgency. He needed to find out if any Torvani survived. The official records said total extinction, but those same records had lied about everything else. It took another 8 hours of searching, but he found them, hidden in refugee registration databases from 3 different systems, small populations, never more than a few thousand in any one place. using different names, different identification codes. They were hiding, probably terrified that whoever killed their species might come back to finish the job. The current count shocked him. Approximately 12,000 Torvani still alive, living in camps that barely had running water, working menial jobs on the fringes of galactic society, forgotten by everyone except the species that murdered them. David sat back in his chair. His mind raced through implications and possibilities. Humanity had become a major galactic power. They had technology, military strength, economic influence, and they'd achieved all of it partly because the Torvani had given them time to survive and grow. Ruth found him still at his desk 16 hours later. She took one look at his screen and went pale. "David, you need to delete this right now. Do you have any idea what you're looking at?" "Evidence of genocide," he said quietly. "Evidence that humanity owes a debt we never paid." That was 847 years ago. Nobody cares about ancient history, especially not when it might upset current trade relationships with the Droll hegemony. Ruth leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are people who made sure this stayed buried, powerful people. You need to let this go." David looked at her, then back at his screen, at the personal logs from humans whose children lived because Torvani died, at the refugee registration numbers showing survivors still struggling in camps, at the evidence of deliberate historical erasure. "No," he said, "I don't think I will." He'd already queued the data for transmission. One keystroke and everything he'd found would broadcast to every human colony, every military installation, every government office. Ruth saw what he was about to do and lunged for the keyboard. Too late. The data packet launched, riding on priority channels that would ensure it reached everyone who mattered. David sat back and waited for the consequences. They came faster than he expected. Within 6 hours, his terminal chimed with an incoming message. High priority, source, Earth Remembrance Council. He'd never heard of them, but their message was clear. Your transmission received, debt acknowledged, actions pending. Across human space, in secret chambers that hadn't opened in 2 centuries, old men and women who remembered what it meant to keep promises gathered. They reviewed David's evidence. They checked it against their own hidden records, and they voted. The decision was unanimous. Admiral Patricia Okonkwo received her orders while reviewing fleet positions. The message contained only 7 words. Remembrance protocol activated. Prepare for full deployment. She read it twice, then issued commands that would change everything. Every human ship, from the smallest patrol craft to the largest dreadnought, received the same instruction. Go dark, disable all tracking, await further orders. Within 12 hours, the entire human fleet vanished from every monitoring system in the galaxy. The Droll hegemony's border stations reported the impossible. Humanity's military had simply disappeared. In a refugee camp on the edge of nowhere, an elderly Torvani named Sylvan taught younglings about the stars. He told them stories of the great sky friends who'd vanished long ago, friends who'd promised to remember but never came back. He didn't know that promise was about to be kept. He didn't know that humanity was coming. And he had no idea that when they arrived, the galaxy would never be the same. Intelligence Director Kravik of the Droll hegemony poured himself a drink and watched the reports scroll across his screen. The human fleet had vanished, every single ship, gone from tracking in less than a day. That shouldn't be possible. "Sir, we're receiving increased chatter from the Galactic Council," his aide reported. "They want to know why we're mobilizing border defenses." Kravik waved dismissively. "Tell them it's a routine exercise, nothing to worry about." But he was worried. The Droll High Command had known for decades that humans possessed fragments of the Torvani incident records. They'd assumed humans would behave like civilized species, prioritize current profits over ancient grudges. Apparently, they'd assumed wrong. The council chambers on Station Unity filled with delegates from 40 species. Ambassador Rebecca of Humanity stood at the central podium, her expression unreadable. The AVIC's representative, a tall being with crystalline features, called for order. Ambassador Rebecca, the Council demands an explanation for your fleet movements. Several member species report that human vessels have abandoned their patrol routes and trade protection duties. Rebecca nodded slowly. We are correcting a historical oversight. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The Drawl representative, a thick-scaled diplomat named Horvath, stood abruptly. What oversight? Humanity owes no one anything. Your current behavior threatens the peace we've all worked to maintain. Peace built on lies isn't peace, Rebecca replied calmly. It's just delayed conflict. She activated the chamber's main display. David's research filled every screen, personal logs, refugee counts, evidence of systematic genocide, all of it laid bare for the entire council to witness. The chamber went silent. Species that had never heard of the Torvani now watched testimony from humans whose children survived because an entire species chose to die. They saw casualty reports that didn't match official records. They watched the evidence of deliberate historical falsification. Horvath's scales flushed dark purple. This is ancient history. The Council has no jurisdiction over events from 847 years ago. What's done is done. The AVIC's representative spoke carefully. The evidence presented suggests genocide and falsification of historical records. Both are serious crimes. However, the practical matter remains. These events occurred outside any current legal framework's statute of limitations. Rebecca's response was quiet but firm. Humanity has no statute of limitations on genocide, especially not genocide of those who died saving our children. We didn't come here to ask permission. We came to inform you of what we're going to do. You cannot be serious, Horvath sputtered. You would risk war over an extinct species, over events none of you were alive to witness. They're not extinct. Rebecca activated another display. Current refugee camp locations, population counts, images of Torvani survivors living in conditions that barely qualified as habitable. They're right here, still suffering, still forgotten by everyone except the species that tried to exterminate them, and us. Admiral Okonkwo's fleet emerged from whatever impossible stealth had hidden them. They appeared simultaneously at 17 different locations. Every single one was a Torvani refugee camp. But the ships didn't attack. They didn't threaten. They delivered supplies. Medical equipment materialized on camp grounds. Construction materials appeared next to makeshift shelters. Human engineers stepped out of transport vessels and started building infrastructure. Doctors set up clinics. Teachers began organizing schools. In the largest camp, Sylvan watched in stunned disbelief as human soldiers erected a monument. He approached cautiously. An older human woman in a crisp uniform waited beside the structure. I'm Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, she said gently. On behalf of humanity, I apologize. We should have come sooner. Sylvan's voice cracked. You remember us. Okonkwo activated the monument's display. Images appeared. Torvani. Ships forming defensive screens, human children being evacuated, names of every Torvani who died scrolling endlessly. We never forgot, she said. We just didn't know you still needed us. We do now. She handed him a data chip. These are monuments on Earth. Every major city has one. They've existed for 800 years, commemorating your sacrifice. We taught our children about you. We just didn't know you were still here, suffering, while we honored your memory. Sylvan collapsed, tears streaming down his face. Around him, other Torvani emerged from their shelters, seeing humans for the first time in centuries, seeing the species they'd saved, now coming to save them. Back at the council, the Drawl delegation was in full panic mode. Horvath demanded sanctions, military intervention, anything to stop what humanity was doing. Most species remained silent, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Rebecca listened to the complaints, then spoke. The Drawl hegemony has 72 hours to surrender every individual responsible for the Torvani genocide. We have their names. We know which ones are still alive. We know where they are. "This is blackmail," Horvath shouted. "No," Rebecca corrected. "This is justice, delayed but not denied. You're threatening war over ancient crimes. The Council cannot allow this precedent." "The Council allowed genocide," Rebecca's voice hardened. "The Council allowed historical falsification. The Council allowed survivors to live in squalor while their murderers prospered. Don't talk to me about precedent." The AVIC's representative requested a recess. The Council adjourned in chaos. In Drawl Capital Chambers, Kravik met with the ruling council. "They're bluffing," insisted High Commander Drast. "They won't actually fight, not over a species that isn't even their own." "Sir," a young officer named Talvin interrupted. "I've accessed the original genocide files, the ones we sealed." "You did what?" Drast roared. "I needed to understand what we're defending." Talvin's voice shook. "Sir, the official story, it's all lies. We didn't fight Torvani insurgents. We murdered civilians, children. We destroyed hospitals and schools. This isn't something we can defend." "We defend it because admitting it destroys our credibility in the galaxy," Drast snapped. "Now delete those files and forget you saw them." Talvin looked at his commander, at Kravik, at the other officers who'd built careers on the foundations of genocide. "No, sir, I don't think I will." The deadline ticked down, 48 hours remaining. Human ships divided into two groups. One remained at the refugee camps, constructing settlements that would become permanent homes. The other moved toward Drawl space, slowly, deliberately, giving them every chance to comply. Okonkwo broadcast a message on all frequencies. She listed every crime, named every commander, identified which ones still held positions of power. Her final words echoed across the galaxy. "You took everything from those who saved our children. Now we're here to balance the scales. You have 72 hours after that. We stop asking." The Drawl response was predictable. They mobilized their entire fleet, hundreds of ships, thousands of weapons. They positioned themselves along their borders and waited. Horvath sent a final message to Rebecca. "You're making a mistake. The Drawl hegemony is one of the galaxy's great powers. You cannot win this fight." Rebecca's response was simple. "You're right, we can't win, because there's no winning in what you forced us to do, but we can make sure justice is served, and we will." The deadline expired. War began, and the galaxy discovered that humanity had been hiding something. Not just their fleet movements, not just their tactical capabilities. They'd been hiding what they were truly capable of when someone threatened those under their protection. The Drawl were about to learn a lesson 847 years in the making. Humanity never forgets a debt, and their retribution would indeed shatter worlds. The human fleet appeared above Dralthos like ghosts materializing from nothing. One moment the Drawl capital world's orbit was empty. The next it held 200 human warships. Every defense system screamed alerts simultaneously. Admiral Okonkwo stood in her command center watching tactical displays. "All ships. Operation Remembrance is active. Rules of engagement are in effect. No civilian casualties, no unnecessary destruction, precision only." The Drawl defense fleet rushed to intercept. 300 vessels against 200. They should have had the advantage. Within minutes, they realized their mistake. Human ships moved like nothing the Drawl had seen before. They dodged incoming fire with impossible precision. Their shields absorbed direct hits without flickering. When they returned fire, each shot struck exactly where intended. Defense platforms went dark. Command centers lost power. Communication arrays stopped transmitting. Not one civilian structure took damage. In the Drawl capital, sirens wailed as the government realized they were under attack. Drast watched his defense grid collapse piece by piece. "How is this possible? Our intelligence said human technology was equivalent to ours." "They lied, sir," Talvin said quietly. "Or we underestimated them. Either way, we're in serious trouble." Across the galaxy, species watched the battle unfold in real time. The Council had opened viewing channels to ensure transparency. What they witnessed shocked them. Every time a Drawl ship was disabled, human vessels broadcast surrender terms. Officers who surrendered were treated well, given medical attention, transferred to secure but comfortable facilities. Those who continued fighting faced overwhelming force but still received opportunities to yield. A Drawl destroyer captain named Korvix watched his systems fail one by one. His communications officer looked at him desperately. "Sir, they're offering surrender again. They say we won't be harmed." Korvix thought about his crew, about the orders he'd received to fight to the death, about the lies he'd been told. Accept their terms, power down weapons. The human response was immediate. Medical ships arrived to treat Korvix's wounded. Engineers helped stabilize his failing reactor. A human officer came aboard personally. "Captain Korvix, I'm Commander Gordon. You and your crew are now under human protection. You'll be treated according to galactic conventions for prisoners of war. Better, actually." "Why?" Korvix asked. "Why show mercy when we wouldn't have shown you any?" Gordon's expression was grim. "Because we're not here to become like you. We're here to show you what you should have been." Within 12 hours, Dralthos was effectively neutralized, not destroyed, not devastated, simply rendered incapable of military resistance. The human fleet had accomplished what should have taken weeks. But the real shock came when Rebecca addressed the council. "We could have destroyed their capital world. We have weapons that could have turned Dralthos into ash. We chose not to, because this isn't about destruction, it's about justice." She displayed footage from human operations. Marines evacuating civilians before capturing military targets, medical teams treating wounded Drawl soldiers, engineers repairing civilian infrastructure damaged in crossfire. "We're going to dismantle their military, capture their war criminals, and leave their people unharmed. That's the difference between warfare and genocide." The AVIC's representative spoke slowly. "You're demonstrating remarkable restraint, but your military capabilities, you've been hiding your true strength for centuries. Why?" "Because we didn't want to be feared," Rebecca said simply. "We wanted to be trusted, but we will not let that trust become complicity in genocide." On Dralthos, Talvin's coup began. He'd gathered younger officers, showed them the true genocide records, watched their horror mirror his own. When the moment came, they moved swiftly. Drast was arrested in his own command center. Kravik fled before they could reach him. Other Old Guard commanders found themselves surrounded by their own soldiers, officers who refused to die for lies. The Drawl population watched as their leadership was dragged into light. The genocide records were broadcast on every channel, unedited, undeniable, horrifying. Citizens who'd believed the propaganda for centuries saw the truth. Some rioted, angry at the humans for attacking. Others wept, ashamed of what their government had done. The younger generation, those who'd grown up questioning the official stories, took to the streets demanding accountability. Talvin broadcast a message to all Drawl worlds. "My name is Talvin, I am Drawl, and I am ashamed. Our leadership committed genocide, they lied about it. They built our prosperity on the bones of innocence. This ends now. We will face justice. We will make amends, and we will ensure our children never repeat our sins." But Kravik wasn't finished. He'd escaped to a hidden facility on Karvath 9, a fortress moon that held weapons even the current Drawl government didn't know about. He activated systems that should have stayed dormant forever. The star destabilization weapon was ancient technology, salvaged from a long-dead species. The Drawl had kept it secret for exactly this scenario, a last resort if they ever faced extinction. Kravik's logic was simple and terrifying. If the Drawl hegemony would fall, if their crimes would be exposed, if they would face justice, then everyone would fall with them. He targeted Earth's sun. Human intelligence detected the activation immediately. Scientists ran calculations and went pale. 96 hours until Earth's sun went supernova. 8 billion people lived on Earth, countless more in the solar system. Admiral Okonkwo received the report and felt ice in her veins. Her homeworld, her family, everything. She could order an immediate strike on every Drawl world, turn their entire species to ash in retaliation. But that wasn't justice, that was revenge. She issued orders that confused her own officers. Continue operations as planned. No retaliation against civilians. Send Gordon's team to Carveth 9. They have 96 hours to stop that weapon. Ma'am, her tactical officer protested. We should strike now, make them pay. We're not them, Okonkwo said firmly. We came here for justice, not massacre. Get Gordon that mission brief, and someone contact the Torvani camps. We're going to need their help. At the refugee settlements, David worked alongside Sylvan documenting Torvani history. When the message came through, Sylvan read it carefully. The weapon. I know this technology. My grandfather worked on similar systems. The Torvani studied them before everything ended. Can you help us stop it? David asked. Sylvan looked at the human who'd uncovered his people's forgotten sacrifice, at the species that had crossed the galaxy to honor a debt. Of course, your people gave us hope again. Let us give you a future. Sylvan's grandson Rivan volunteered immediately. I'll go. Grandfather can guide from here. Someone needs to be there in person. Gordon's team assembled. Human specialists in demolitions, engineering, combat, and 3 Torvani volunteers including Rivan. The ship launched toward Carveth 9, racing against a countdown that threatened everything. On Earth, evacuation began, orderly, calm, disciplined, but most citizens refused to leave. If this is our end, they said, we face it here. The Council watched in stunned silence. Humanity faced extinction and still refused to strike at civilians, still focused on precision justice rather than blind revenge. Rebecca stood before them one final time. This is what the Torvani taught us. Sacrifice for the right reasons, protection of innocence, honor over survival. If we abandon those principles to save ourselves, we wouldn't be worth saving. Gordon's ship approached Carveth 9. Kravik's forces waited. The fortress was heavily defended. Time was running out. And Earth's sun continued its countdown to catastrophe. But humanity had learned something 847 years ago. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in weapons. It's in choosing who you'll die to protect, and what you'll refuse to become even when facing annihilation. The Torvani had shown them that. Now it was time to prove they'd learned the lesson. Gordon's infiltration team hit Carveth 9 outer defenses like a surgical blade. Explosives took out automated turrets. Hackers disabled sensor grids. Marines cleared hallways with brutal efficiency. But every second mattered. Earth's sun had 82 hours remaining. Inside the fortress, Kravik watched his defenses crumble. Detonate the secondary charges, collapse the outer tunnels. I don't care how many of them die. They're not reaching the core. Explosions rocked the facility. Gordon's team scattered, diving for cover as corridors collapsed around them. 2 Marines didn't make it, crushed under tons of debris. The team regrouped in an intact section, their numbers reduced but determination unchanged. Rivan, can you sense the weapon from here? Gordon asked. The young Torvani closed his eyes, feeling for the distinctive energy signature his grandfather had described. That way, deep in the central structure, but there are too many defenses between us and it. Then we make a path, Gordon signaled his demolitions expert. Plant charges here and here, we're going through the walls. On Earth, the evacuation continued. Shuttles launched every few minutes, carrying children and elderly to colony worlds. But the vast majority of Earth's population remained. They gathered in cities and towns, in homes with families, in parks watching the sky. News broadcasts showed the countdown. Everyone knew what was coming. Yet there was no panic, no riots, just quiet acceptance that if this was the end, they'd face it with dignity. In one broadcast, a reporter interviewed citizens. Why aren't you evacuating? An elderly woman answered, my grandson is on that mission to save us. If he's willing to risk everything, the least I can do is trust him. Besides, this is our home. Running won't change what we are. The Galactic Council watched Earth's response with growing amazement. Species that would have descended into chaos showed calm, courage, unity. The Avix representative spoke quietly. I begin to understand why the Torvani chose to save them. Gordon's team reached the weapon chamber after 31 hours of constant fighting. They'd lost 6 more team members. Kravik's forces fought with desperate fury, knowing they'd face justice if captured. The chamber was massive, dominated by a device that pulsed with terrible energy. It's already armed, Riven said, examining the controls. The feedback loop is established. Earth-Sun is locked in. Gordon contacted Admiral Okonkwo. Ma'am, we have a problem. Shutting this down requires someone to enter the radiation core, manual override. No way to do it remotely. Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen, her expression unreadable. What's the survivability rate? 0, ma'am. Whoever goes in has maybe 3 minutes before lethal exposure. Might complete the shutdown. Probably won't survive to see if it worked. Understood, Okonkwo paused. Get it done. I'm authorizing whatever's necessary. Gordon looked at his team, started to speak. Riven interrupted him. I'll do it. Absolutely not, Gordon said firmly. You're a civilian, I won't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm volunteering. Riven moved toward the core entrance. Gordon grabbed his arm. Listen to me, we just found you people. We're not going to let another Torvani die for us. Riven smiled sadly. That's exactly why it has to be me. 847 years ago, my ancestors saved humanity because they believed you were worth saving. You crossed the galaxy to honor that sacrifice. You're fighting a war to protect survivors you didn't even know existed. You're facing extinction and still won't compromise your principles. He gently removed Gordon's hand. This isn't sacrifice, Commander. This is proof they chose right. This is me saving the species that refused to forget us. On Earth, Sylvan watched the transmission, tears streaming down his aged face. No, not my grandson, not him. David stood beside him, equally devastated. Riven, please, there has to be another way. But there wasn't, and everyone knew it. Riven entered the core chamber. Radiation alarms screamed immediately. His suit's protection would last minutes at best. He moved to the central console, hands already shaking from exposure. Grandfather, I need you to walk me through this. His voice crackled over the comm. Sylvan composed himself. Every instinct screamed to tell his grandson to run, to live. But he knew Riven had already made his choice. The primary coupling, blue conduit on your left, you need to manually separate. Riven's hands worked, following instructions as his body absorbed lethal doses of radiation. His vision blurred. Blood ran from his nose. Got it, what's next? The shutdown sequence took 11 minutes. Riven's body was failing. His voice grew weaker with each instruction, but he never stopped, never hesitated. His hands moved with desperate precision. Last step, Sylvan's voice broke. The emergency shutdown lever, red handle at the base of the primary reactor, pull it down, all the way. Riven crawled, his legs no longer functioning. He reached the lever, pulled with strength he didn't know he still had. Something deep in the machinery groaned, the deadly pulsing slowed, stopped. Earth-Sun stabilized, 8 billion lives saved. Riven collapsed. His suit's medical readouts showed catastrophic system failure. Gordon and his team rushed into the core, radiation be damned. They carried Riven out, medics swarmed, trying everything. It wasn't enough. Riven's eyes found Gordon through the haze of pain. Did it work? You saved them all, Gordon said, voice thick with emotion, every single one. Good, Riven smiled. Tell David, tell your people the debt is paid, we're even now. He died surrounded by the humans he'd saved, just as his ancestors had died surrounded by the humans they'd protected. Admiral Okonkwo stood before the council, her face carved from stone. Riven of the Torvani sacrificed himself to save Earth, to save humanity, just like his people did 847 years ago. We came here to honor a debt. Instead, we've incurred a new one. She activated a display. showed footage of Rivan's final moments, of his courage, his sacrifice, his choice. The Torvani have paid their last price for humanity's survival. We will not allow them to pay another. Her next words shook the galaxy. Effective immediately, humanity declares the Torvani Protectorate. We pledge our full military, economic, and technological resources to ensuring Torvani prosperity and safety. Any threat to the Torvani is a threat to humanity. Any attack on Torvani worlds is an attack on Earth. We will protect them as they once protected us. Talvin appeared on screen from Dralthos. The Draal Commonwealth, our new government, surrenders all remaining war criminals to galactic justice. We also offer reparations to the Torvani people and request to assist in rebuilding their civilization. We cannot undo our crimes, but we can try to make amends. Kravik was captured hours later, found hiding in the fortress's depths. Talvin's forces took him alive. He would face trial, face justice, face the families of those he'd murdered. On Earth, 8 billion people mourned a Torvani they'd never met. A young man who could have lived but chose to die so they could survive. Monuments were being built before his body was even cold. And humanity made a promise. The Torvani would never stand alone again. Never be forgotten again. Never have to sacrifice again. This was the debt that could never be fully paid. But humanity would spend forever trying. 6 months after the war ended, David stood in the newly constructed Torvani Human Friendship Archive on Earth. The building sprawled across 50 acres. Every wall held stories. Every room contained memories. This wasn't just a museum. It was a promise made permanent. Sylvan walked beside him, his age showing more now. The loss of Riven had carved deep lines in his face, but his eyes held something they hadn't before, hope. "You've done so much," Sylvan said quietly, looking at displays showing Torvani history, culture, achievements. "My people are remembered now, truly remembered." "It's not enough," David replied. "It will never be enough, but it's a start." The trial of Kravik and the other war criminals had concluded 3 weeks prior. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, every species watching as justice was methodically, carefully, undeniably served. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies devastating, the verdict unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence shocked many. Life imprisonment, not execution. But the location was what mattered. The criminals would spend their remaining years maintaining the very archives that documented their crimes, preserving Torvani history, learning the names of every person they'd killed. Making them live with what they've done, Talvin had explained when questioned. Death would be mercy they don't deserve. The Draal Commonwealth was rising from the hegemony's ashes. Talvin's government had opened every sealed record, published every hidden crime. Young Draal grew up learning the truth. Their education included mandatory courses on the genocide, on the cost of silence, on the responsibility each generation bore to prevent such horrors. Some older Draal resisted, clinging to old pride, but their children rejected them. "We won't inherit your shame," became the rallying cry of Draal youth. "We'll build something better." The Torvani settlements transformed beyond recognition. Human engineers had built cities, not camps, actual cities with schools, hospitals, cultural centers. Torvani population was growing for the first time in 847 years. Children played in parks, artists created works, scientists researched. But the relationship wasn't one-sided. Torvani ecological knowledge was helping humans terraform worlds more sustainably. Their philosophical traditions were influencing human culture. Their music filled concert halls on Earth. Admiral Okonkwo had retired from military service. She taught now at the Human Defense Academy. Her first lecture to new cadets became legendary. "We have weapons that can shatter planets," she told them. "Technology that can end civilizations, power that makes us dangerous to everyone including ourselves. But our greatest strength isn't in our arsenal. It's in knowing when not to use it. Every person you save, every mercy you show, every time you choose justice over revenge, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us worth the sacrifices others made for us. The Galactic Council had changed too. The remembrance protocols were now universal law. Genocide carried no statute of limitations. Historical falsification was a crime against all species. Multiple civilizations were excavating their own buried histories, confronting their own forgotten debts. The Avix established remembrance councils modeled on humanity's. Other species followed. The galaxy wasn't achieving perfect peace, but it was achieving honest reckoning with its past. Rebecca no longer served as ambassador. She'd moved to a Torvani world, working directly with survivors, helping them navigate their new reality. She'd told the council, "I spent years speaking for humanity. Now I want to speak with the Torvani, learn from them, help them however I can." Gordon had stayed in military service, but his role changed. He commanded the Torvani Protection Fleet, a joint human-Torvani force dedicated to ensuring no threat ever reached Torvani worlds. His crew was mixed, humans and Torvani serving side by side. "It's what Riven would have wanted," he'd said when accepting the command. "Not separation, partnership, not debt, friendship." David and Sylvan reached the Archive's central chamber, a massive statue. Dominated the space. Riven, depicted not in death but in life. Young, determined, hopeful around the statue's base, names were carved. Every Torvani who died saving humans, every human who died protecting Torvani. The list grew shorter on one side, longer on the other. "We're adding names now," Sylvan observed. "Humans dying for us, the balance shifts." "There is no balance," David said. "There's just us, together, trying to be worthy of each other." A group of younglings entered the chamber, mixed human and Torvani children. They'd grown up together, learned together, played together. To them, the idea of separation was strange. These were just friends. One Torvani child asked her teacher, "Why did humans help when no one else did?" The teacher, a human woman named Alice, knelt beside her. "Because they understood something important. The past isn't dead. It lives in every choice we make. They remembered us when forgetting would have been easier, and that remembering changed everything." In a classroom on a Droll world, students learned about the genocide, about the lies, about the cost of their ancestors' crimes. Their teacher, an elderly Droll who'd lived through the transition, spoke carefully. "You are not responsible for what was done, but you are responsible for ensuring it never happens again. You must remember, even when memory is painful, especially when memory is painful." A student raised his hand. "Teacher, will other species ever forgive us?" "Some will, some won't, some already have." The teacher gestured to a photo on the wall, Droll and Torvani workers building a school together. "But forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned, through action, through change, through ensuring your children are better than we were." 5 years after the war, the galaxy looked different. Human Torvani joint colonies thrived. Droll students studied on Torvani worlds and vice versa. Species that had ignored each other for millennia were talking, learning, cooperating. The Alliance of Remembrance had 40 member species now, each committed to honoring historical debts, protecting vulnerable civilizations, preventing genocides before they started. It wasn't perfect. Conflicts still arose, but now there was framework for justice, for accountability, for memory. David's final entry in the archive was a personal message, recorded before he died at age 89. "To whoever reads this in the future, remember that history is not a burden, it's a compass. It shows us who we were, who we are, and who we choose to become. The Torvani saved us. We honored them, and in doing so, we saved ourselves. May you find your own debts worth paying, your own honor worth keeping, and your own future worth building." Sylvan lived to see his great-grandchildren attend university on Earth, to watch Torvani culture flourish again, to know his people would never be forgotten. His last words were to a young human archivist. "Thank you for remembering, for caring, for proving that 847 years ago, we chose the right species to save." The memorial on Earth burned eternal flames, one for every Torvani who died saving humans, one for every human who died protecting Torvani, one for Rivan, whose sacrifice ended a war and began a friendship. Visitors came from across the galaxy, standing in silence before the flames, reading the names, understanding that some debts transcend time, some bonds transcend species, some memories shape tomorrow more than yesterday. And in quiet moments, when humans looked at the stars, they remembered. They remembered the Torvani, who chose sacrifice over survival. They remembered Rivan, who proved that courage spans generations. They remembered that power without principle is tyranny, that memory without action is betrayal, that debts of honor are the only debts worth everything. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Humanity never forgets a debt. Their retribution can indeed shatter worlds, but their remembrance can build new ones, better ones. Together,